Under a Mackerel Sky, written and read by Rick Stein. Part 1, Rikki Tikki Tavi. Chapter 1. I loved fishing off the rocks with my dad. There weren't a lot of things I loved doing with him. I was a bit scared of him, because he shouted a lot. But fishing was a time when the tying of knots in nylon line and the threading of ragworms on hooks involved us with practicalities, and I forgot my reserve. He kept his wooden reels in a green canvas bag flecked with fish scales, and he always took with him a little wire folding stool with an orange cloth seat, which he also used when painting watercolours of the medieval bridge at Wadebridge or the view of the Camel estuary towards Stepper and Pentower Points. We had a house in Cornwall on Trevose Head, and my dad knew a lot of local fishermen, mostly from going to pubs, the Cornish Arms and Farmers' Arms in St Merrin, and several of the half a dozen or so pubs in Padstow, particularly the London Inn, the Golden Lion and the Caledonian. A strong memory of childhood is sitting in the back of our Jaguar with my sister Henrietta drinking St Austell ginger beer and eating crisps with a little blue paper twist of salt, waiting while my mum and dad had a drink on a dull day. We were never allowed inside the pub, but the smell of beer and tobacco smoke and the sound of good-humoured conversation billowing out as people came and went was tantalising, particularly in the warm summer drizzle, when the dampness of the air seemed to hold in those aromas, infused with the scent of wild fennel from hedges nearby. Henrietta remembers interminable hours in one boat or another, with Bill Cullum fishing for mackerel, garfish and pollock, or with Johnny Mert hauling lobster pots. Most of the time she would sit and read. Occasionally we'd both be sick. Once, alone with my father in a small boat, we narrowly missed being turned over in the surf at Polzeth. In our excitement at catching so many bass, we had let our lines become tangled, snagging the propeller and stopping the engine. I remember the panic then, as we drifted towards the breaking waves. Years later, two local boys, Bronco Bate and Arnold Mert, out salmon netting on the Doom Bar, drowned because the same thing happened. The atmosphere in Padstow the next morning was as dark as I can recall. The downstairs bedroom next to the kitchen in our house, Polventon, would often be used for storing live lobsters, crab or crayfish, which crawled over the floor, bubbling and making cracking noises. I loved the crab meat and quite liked the crayfish, but the lobster was too intense. Its firm, white, sweet, salty flesh was too strong for a child, and the bright yellow mayonnaise too pungent with the olive oil that my mother always used. How special now are those flavours that I couldn't take then. The beer tasted horribly bitter, particularly the Whitbread pale ale, which some of the workers on our farm drank. I can still recall the black, heavy screw stoppers with red rubber seals, and the men sitting with their glasses on the just-filled barley sacks at lunch break during harvest time. Fishing off the rocks, we never caught much more than wrasse and pollock. The wrasse were gorgeously coloured, deep red, orange, yellow, and sometimes green or golden-hued, but tasted of nothing. The pollock were always the same colour, a silver belly and brown back and large dark blue eyes. My dad and I would take the fish back to the house, where the wrasse were treated with little enthusiasm by my mother. She left them till they were starting to smell, I think to make me feel better about it, then threw them out onto the springy cliff grass for the gulls. The pollock she made into fish cakes, often with mackerel, which were ever present due to the almost daily boat fishing trips. All the cooking I've ever done since is in some way an attempt to recapture some of the flavours of the cooking at home when I was a boy. Those pollock fish cakes with mashed potatoes, parsley, salt, pepper, and dazzlingly fresh mackerel, just put under the grill with a sprig of fennel, are still the best I've ever eaten. One summer we went to stay on the south coast of Cornwall at Church.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?